My husband begged me to donate part of my liver to save his mother. I agreed. 3 days after surgery, while I was still bleeding through my bandages, he handed me divorce papers. His mistress stood beside him, rubbing her pregnant belly with a smug smile. But what none of them knew was that my liver never made it into my mother-in-law's body. It went to someone else entirely. Someone who would help me burn their world to the ground. This is my story of betrayal, karma, and the sweetest revenge. The fluorescent lights of Chicago Memorial Hospital had become my second home. For 3 weeks, I had watched my mother-in-law, Vivian Hartwell, deteriorate in the hepatology ward. Liver failure, the doctors said. Years of prescription drug abuse had finally caught up to her, though the family would never admit it publicly. To the outside world, it was simply a tragic medical condition. I sat in the waiting room, my hands cold despite the stuffy air. My husband Derek paced back and forth, his Italian loafers clicking against the linoleum floor. He was still handsome at 34, with his dark hair and sharp jaw, but lately his face seemed permanently creased with stress. Maya. He knelt in front of me, taking my hands. His eyes were bloodshot. The transplant coordinator called. "You're a match." My stomach dropped. We had discussed this possibility when I agreed to get tested, but hearing it confirmed made everything terrifyingly real. "A partial liver donation," I whispered. "That's major surgery, Derek." "I know, baby. I know." He squeezed my hands tighter. "But Mom is dying. The waiting list could take years. She doesn't have years. She barely has months." I thought about Vivian. In the 4 years since Derek and I married, she had never once called me by my name. It was always that girl or your wife when speaking to Derek. She criticized my cooking, my clothes, my job as a kindergarten teacher. She reminded me constantly that I came from nothing, that my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, that I spent my teenage years bouncing between foster homes. "She's never liked me," I said quietly. "That's not true." Derek's voice was smooth, practiced. "Mom is just old-fashioned. She takes time to warm up to people. But Maya, think about this. If you save her life, everything changes. She'll have to accept you. She'll have to love you. You'll finally be a real Hartwell. A real Hartwell." Those words pierced something deep inside me. All I had ever wanted was a family, a place to belong. Derek knew that. He had known it since the day we met at that coffee shop 5 years ago, when I was a broke college student and he was a charming businessman who made me feel seen for the first time in my life. "What about the risks?" I asked. "The recovery time?" "The doctors say the liver regenerates. You'll be back to normal in a few months, and I'll be with you every step of the way." He kissed my forehead. "Please, Maya, you're my wife. You're the only one who can save my mother. The only one who can save this family." I closed my eyes. I thought about the empty Christmases of my childhood, the foster families who never quite wanted me, the loneliness that had followed me like a shadow until Derek came along. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll do it." Derek's face lit up. He pulled me into a tight hug, and over his shoulder I saw something flicker in his eyes. Relief, yes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like triumph. The next 48 hours were a blur of medical tests, consent forms, and legal documents. I was poked, prodded, scanned, and interviewed by psychiatrists to confirm I was donating voluntarily. Derek was by my side through all of it, attentive and loving. The night before surgery, I sat in a small office with Derek and the hospital's legal coordinator. There was a stack of papers in front of me, each one requiring my signature. "This confirms your voluntary consent," the coordinator explained. "This one acknowledges the surgical risks. And this," she slid a final document toward me, "is the emergency reallocation waiver." "What's that?" I asked, squinting at the dense legal text. "Standard protocol," Derek answered quickly. "It just says that if something goes wrong with Mom's surgery, the doctors can make medical decisions on the spot." The coordinator nodded. "In the rare event that the primary recipient becomes medically ineligible during the procedure, this allows us to redirect the harvested organ to the next compatible patient on the critical list. It ensures your sacrifice isn't wasted. I was exhausted. My brain couldn't process any more information. Derek handed me a pen with an encouraging smile. Just sign, honey. Then we can get some rest before the big day. I signed. The operating room was freezing. I lay on the table, staring up at the massive surgical lights, feeling impossibly small. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over my face. Count backward from 10. 10, 9, 8. I thought of Derek's promise. I thought of Vivian finally calling me daughter. I thought of the family I was about to earn with a piece of my own body. 7. 6. Then darkness. The first thing I noticed was the pain. It radiated from my right side like someone had taken a hot iron to my ribs. I tried to open my eyes, but the light was too bright. My throat was dry, my tongue thick and useless. Slowly, the world came into focus. I was in a hospital room, but it wasn't the private suite Derek had promised. The walls were a sickly green. A water stain spread across the ceiling. Through a flimsy curtain, I could hear someone coughing. This was the general ward. The charity ward. I tried to sit up, but the pain knocked me back down. My hand went to my side, feeling the thick bandages wrapped around my torso. The surgery had happened. Part of my liver was gone. The door opened. Derek walked in first. He was wearing a crisp navy suit, his hair styled perfectly. Behind him came a woman I recognized but wished I didn't. Amber Collins. She had been Derek's friend from business school, always hovering at parties, always touching his arm a little too long. She was beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, with platinum blonde hair and lips painted blood red. And behind them both, pushed in a wheelchair by a nurse, was my mother-in-law. Vivian looked pale and weak, but her eyes were as cold and sharp as ever. "Derek?" My voice came out as a croak. "Why am I here? You said I'd be in the VIP wing." Derek walked to my bedside. His face was blank, empty, like he was looking at a stranger. He tossed an envelope onto my chest. The impact made me gasp in pain. "What is this?" I whispered. "Divorce papers." His voice was flat. "Sign them, and this will all be over quickly." The room spun. I thought I was hallucinating, a side effect of the anesthesia. A nightmare I would wake up from any second. "I don't understand," I stammered. "The surgery. Your mother. I just gave her my liver." Vivian laughed. It was a horrible, rattling sound that echoed off the bare walls. "Your liver?" She shook her head slowly. "Oh, you stupid girl. You always were too trusting." Amber stepped forward, and for the first time, I noticed the massive diamond ring glittering on her left hand. She placed her other hand on her stomach, which curved outward beneath her designer dress. "I'm pregnant," Amber announced, her smile dripping with satisfaction. 3 months along. Derek and I are getting married as soon as your little divorce is finalized." I looked at Derek, searching for any trace of the man who had held me, kissed me, promised me forever. 4 years, I choked out. 4 years of marriage. I just let them cut me open for your family. And you're doing this? You served your purpose. Derek shrugged, straightening his cufflinks. We needed someone compatible. Someone naive enough to sign anything we put in front of her. Someone with no family to ask questions. You fit the criteria. Vivian wheeled herself closer to my bed. Her thin lips curled into a sneer. You were never going to be a Hartwell. You were just a spare part, a walking organ bank. And now that we have what we needed, you can crawl back to whatever gutter you came from. Tears streamed down my face, soaking into the flat hospital pillow. The pain in my side was nothing compared to the agony ripping through my heart. "I'll sue you," I whispered. "I'll go to the police. This is fraud. This is perfectly legal." Derek pulled out his phone and showed me a document. My own signature stared back at me. Voluntary donation. No coercion. No compensation. You signed everything willingly, Maya. Even our prenup says you get nothing in a divorce. You'll be lucky if I give you enough for a bus ticket out of the city. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear out the IV in my arm and claw at his face, but I was too weak, too broken. The door burst open. A tall man in a white coat strode in, his expression thunderous. Behind him came 2 nurses and a security guard. I recognized him as Dr. Harrison, the chief of transplant surgery who had led my operation. "What is the meaning of this?" Dr. Harrison demanded. "Who authorized this patient to be placed in the general ward? And why is she being subjected to emotional distress less than 24 hours post-surgery?" Derek straightened his shoulders, putting on his businessman mask. "Doctor, this is a private family matter. My mother just had a successful transplant, and we're simply—" "Your mother," Dr. Harrison interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut glass, "did not receive a transplant." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Vivian's face went white. "What did you say?" Dr. Harrison walked past Derek and stood at the foot of my bed, his body positioned like a shield between me and my tormentors. "Mrs. Hartwell, the transplant surgery was canceled. Approximately 30 minutes before we were scheduled to implant your daughter-in-law's liver into your body, your final blood work came back. You tested positive for hepatitis C antibodies, likely from contaminated needles during one of your previous cosmetic procedures abroad. Your immune system would have rejected the new liver tissue within hours." "That's impossible," Vivian sputtered. "I feel fine. The surgery happened, they cut me open. We performed a preparatory incision, yes, but we never implanted the organ." Dr. Harrison's tone was clinical, merciless. "You were closed up and given standard post-operative care, but there is no new liver in your body, Mrs. Hartwell. You remain on the transplant list, though given your infection status, you've been moved to a lower priority bracket." Derek grabbed the doctor's arm. "Then where the hell is my wife's liver? That was supposed to be my mother's. We arranged everything." "Doctor." Harrison looked at Derek's hand until he removed it. "Under the emergency reallocation protocol that Mrs. Maya Hartwell signed, when a primary recipient is deemed ineligible, the harvested organ is immediately redirected to the next compatible patient in critical condition." He paused, and something like satisfaction flickered across his face. "Your wife's liver was transplanted into Mr. Theodore Ashford." The name hit the room like a bomb. Theodore Ashford. The Theodore Ashford, founder of Ashford Capital, one of the largest private equity firms in the Midwest, a man whose net worth was measured in billions, not millions. A man who had been quietly battling liver disease for years, his condition kept secret from the public to avoid affecting his company's stock price. Derek's face had gone from white to green. "Ashford?" he stammered. "As in, the Ashford?" "The very same." Dr. Harrison turned to me, and his expression softened dramatically. "Mrs. Hartwell, Maya, Mr. Ashford's personal assistant is waiting outside. He has arranged for you to be transferred to a private recovery suite on the executive floor, adjacent to his own room. Mr. Ashford wishes to thank you personally. Your liver saved his life when he had less than 48 hours to live." I stared at the doctor, unable to process what was happening. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You will." Dr. Harrison offered me a gentle smile. "For now, please know that you are under the protection and care of the Ashford family. Whatever these people have done to you," he gestured dismissively at Derek, Vivian, and Amber, "it ends now." "Wait." Derek stepped forward, his voice taking on a desperate, pleading tone. "Maya, honey, listen. That talk about divorce, it was a misunderstanding. Mom was upset. We didn't mean any of it. Let's forget this happened, okay? We're family." I looked at the divorce papers still lying on my chest. Then I looked at Amber's pregnant belly, then at Vivian's hateful eyes. "Get out." My voice was quiet but steady. "Maya, please. Security." Dr. Harrison nodded at the guard. "Please escort these individuals from the building. They are not permitted to return without written authorization from the patient." As Derek was pulled toward the door, still protesting, still bargaining, I felt something shift inside me. The old Maya, the one who had been desperate for love and acceptance, was dying. In her place, something harder was being born. The executive floor of Chicago Memorial was another world. My new suite had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Fresh flowers filled every surface. A personal nurse was assigned to monitor my vitals around the clock. On my second day there, I was finally strong enough to receive a visitor. Theodore Ashford was 73 years old, but even weakened by surgery, he radiated authority. He was wheeled into my room by a stern Asian man in an impeccable suit who introduced himself as Mr. Park, Mr. Ashford's chief of staff. "So you're my guardian angel." Mr. Ashford's voice was gravelly but warm. He studied me with sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. A kindergarten teacher from the South Side who donated her liver to save a monster-in-law, only to have it end up in an old fossil like me instead. I wasn't sure if I should laugh or cry. That's one way to put it, sir. Call me Ted. Or Grandpa, if you're comfortable. My granddaughter used to call me that before she passed. A shadow crossed his face. Leukemia. She was only 19. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Life has a way of taking and giving." He leaned forward in his wheelchair. "Maya, do you know what it means to have a second chance? At my age, every sunrise is a gift, and you gave that to me. My doctors say I could have another decade or more now. I'm glad, truly." "I've had Mr. Park look into your situation." Ted's expression hardened. "That husband of yours, Derek Hartwell, his family's real estate development company. Small fish, but dirty fish. And I've learned he's been using your name in ways you probably don't know about." I frowned. "Using my name?" Mr. Park handed me a folder. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, and corporate registration papers. My name appeared on all of them. "Derek Hartwell is not as clever as he thinks," Mr. Park explained. "Over the past 3 years, he has registered several shell companies and property holdings under your name. The purpose was asset protection. If his main business failed or was sued, these assets would be safe because technically, you own them." I flipped through the papers, my head spinning. A warehouse in Gary, 2 commercial properties in the West Loop, a condo in Lincoln Park. "He never told me about any of this," I said, "because he assumed you would remain his obedient wife forever." Ted smiled grimly. "He assumed wrong. What does this mean?" "It means that when he rushed through that divorce filing to be with his pregnant mistress, he made a catastrophic error. He was so eager to be rid of you that he used a boilerplate divorce petition that waives all claims to assets held in the spouse's name. He didn't bother to audit what was actually in your name because he thought it was all under his control anyway." The realization dawned on me slowly, then all at once. Everything in these papers becomes mine in the divorce. Legally, irrevocably, and completely yours. Ted's eyes twinkled. "Approximately $4 million in assets that Derek Hartwell just accidentally gifted to you." For the first time since waking up from surgery, I laughed. It was a wild, cathartic sound that made my stitches ache. "But that's not enough for him to face real consequences," Ted continued. "So, I have a proposition for you, Maya. Let me teach you. Let me show you how this world really works. Not the world of kindergarten classrooms and household budgets, but the world of leverage, power, and strategic patience. In 1 year, I will make you into someone Derek Hartwell won't even recognize. Someone who can stand in any boardroom and command respect. Someone with teeth." I looked at this man, this stranger who owed me nothing but was offering me everything. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because your liver is keeping me alive," Ted said simply. "Because you remind me of my granddaughter, who was also too kind for this cruel world. And because I am a very old man who has made enemies of people far more powerful than Derek Hartwell, and I know what it's like to be underestimated." He extended his hand. "What do you say, Maya? Ready to stop being a victim?" I took his hand. My grip was firmer than I expected. "Teach me everything." The next 8 months were the hardest and most transformative of my life. I moved into Ted's Lake Forest estate, where every day was scheduled down to the minute. Morning workouts with a personal trainer to rebuild my strength. Breakfast meetings with Ted where he grilled me on financial news and market analysis. Afternoon sessions with private tutors in corporate law, negotiation tactics, and business strategy. Evening dinners with Ted's business associates, where I learned to navigate high society's treacherous waters. My appearance changed. Gone was the mousy kindergarten teacher with the unstyled hair and thrift store dresses. I learned to carry myself differently, to speak differently, to command attention when I entered a room. Ted's personal stylist curated a wardrobe that projected power without sacrificing elegance. But the biggest change was inside. The part of me that had been trained to be small, to be grateful, to accept whatever scraps of affection were thrown my way, that part was systematically demolished and rebuilt. Meanwhile, Mr. Park kept me informed about the Hartwells. Derek's development company was hemorrhaging money. Vivian's medical bills were astronomical. Without the transplant, she needed dialysis 3 times a week. Her condition was deteriorating. Derek had started selling off assets to stay afloat, unaware that the most valuable properties in his portfolio were no longer his to sell. He applied for a business loan last week, Mr. Park reported one afternoon, using the Lincoln Park condo as collateral, the condo that is registered in your name. I set down my coffee cup. Collateral fraud. That's a felony. Indeed it is. The final piece of the puzzle arrived 2 months before the 1-year anniversary of my surgery. Derek, desperate for capital, had heard rumors that a new investment firm was looking to pour money into Chicago real estate development. The firm was called Phoenix Capital. He didn't know that I had founded it 3 months ago using my inheritance from Ted's business education. Through intermediaries, we arranged for Derek to receive an invitation to a private investor showcase. The night of the event, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in the penthouse suite of the Drake Hotel. I wore a midnight blue gown that cost more than my entire wardrobe had been worth a year ago. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist. Around my neck hung a sapphire pendant that Ted had given me as a graduation gift. "You look like a different person," said a voice from the doorway. I turned. Dr. Ryan Harrison stood there in a perfectly fitted tuxedo. Over the past year, he had gone from being my surgeon to my friend to something that was beginning to feel like more. He had visited me regularly during my recovery, and our conversations had evolved from medical checkups to dinners that lasted until midnight. "Different is the point," I replied, adjusting my earring. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for 8 months." The ballroom was filled with Chicago's elite, politicians, business leaders, old money families whose names were on hospital wings and museum galleries. And there, near the bar, looking uncomfortable in a rental tuxedo, was Derek Hartwell. I watched him from across the room, nursing a glass of champagne. He looked older than I remembered, tired. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the desperate energy of a man who knew he was drowning. The lights dimmed. I walked to the stage, and a spotlight found me. "Good evening, everyone." My voice carried clearly through the microphone, smooth and confident. "I'm Maya Chen, founder of Phoenix Capital. Thank you for joining us tonight." I saw the exact moment Derek recognized me. His face went through a rapid succession of emotions, confusion, disbelief, then pure, undiluted terror. "At Phoenix Capital, we believe in investing in integrity," I continued, looking directly at him. "We believe that business should be built on trust, transparency, and genuine value creation. Unfortunately, not everyone shares these principles." After my speech, I descended into the crowd. Derek practically sprinted across the room to intercept me. "Maya?" His voice cracked. "Is that really you?" "Mr. Hartwell." I kept my tone professionally cold. "I don't believe we have an appointment." "Maya, what is this? How did you— you look incredible. I had no idea you were involved with Ashford Capital. There's a lot you didn't know about me." I sipped my champagne. "Or perhaps you simply never bothered to find out. Listen, about everything that happened at the hospital." Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I was under so much pressure. Mom was dying. Amber was threatening to leave. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we can fix this, Maya. We can start over." "Can we?" I tilted my head. "And what about Amber, your pregnant fiancée?" "Amber means nothing to me." The words tumbled out eagerly, pathetically. "She was just there when I was vulnerable. You're the one I really loved, Maya. You're the one I married." I laughed softly. "That's funny, because I have a recording from your dinner last month with Amber's mother where you called me, and I quote, 'that naive little orphan I kept around for spare parts.'" Derek's face went gray. Here's what's going to happen, Derek. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear swimming in his eyes. Tomorrow morning, you're going to discover that every property you've been using as collateral for your business loans doesn't belong to you anymore. The divorce you rushed through so carelessly, it transferred everything in my name to me, legally and irrevocably. That's not possible. My lawyers. Your lawyers are incompetent. Mine are not. I smiled. You're also going to discover that using property you don't own as loan collateral is a felony. The FBI has already been notified. Derek grabbed my arm. Security immediately stepped forward, but I waved them off. Maya, please. He was begging now, all pretense of dignity abandoned. I'll do anything. I'll give you anything. Just don't do this. There's nothing you have that I want. I removed his hand from my arm. Except maybe the satisfaction of watching you lose everything. I turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Derek? You might want to get a paternity test for Amber's baby. I have it on good authority that the timing doesn't quite add up with your trip to Detroit in February. Apparently Amber was spotted at a hotel in Miami that week with someone named Marcus. Your former business partner, if I'm not mistaken. I left him standing there, mouth open, his world collapsing around him. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The FBI raided Derek's office 2 days later. His accounts were frozen, his passport confiscated. The forensic accountants found years of tax fraud, embezzlement, and falsified documents. His trial date was set for fall. Amber disappeared the moment the money dried up. Derek demanded a DNA test, which confirmed what I already knew. The baby wasn't his. She eventually resurfaced in Miami with Marcus, where they were both arrested for wire fraud in an unrelated scheme. Vivian's condition deteriorated rapidly after the stress of her son's arrest. Without the resources for proper care, she was moved to a state facility. I visited her once, near the end, not to gloat, but to understand. She lay in a narrow bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and whirred. Her eyes, once so full of venom, were cloudy and confused. You came, she whispered, after everything. I sat in the plastic chair beside her bed. I wanted to ask you something. Ask, why did you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. You reminded me of myself. Before I married into money, before I learned to be cruel, I saw my old weakness in you, and I despised it. A tear rolled down her papery cheek. I was wrong. About everything. Yes, I agreed. You were. I stood to leave. Maya. Her hand reached for mine. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at the woman who had tormented me, who had conspired to use me as a human spare part, who had celebrated my humiliation. I forgive you, I said finally. Not for your sake, for mine. Vivian died 3 days later. Derek, out on bail awaiting trial, was not permitted to attend the funeral. 1 year after my surgery, I stood on the rooftop terrace of my new Lakeshore Drive apartment. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Ted Ashford had passed away peacefully 2 months earlier, leaving me a significant inheritance and, more importantly, the skills and connections to manage it. His final letter to me was framed in my office. You were the granddaughter I thought I'd lost. Now go change the world. I had used my resources to establish the Second Chance Foundation, providing financial and legal support for domestic abuse survivors and organ donors who had been exploited. It felt right to turn my pain into something that could help others. The terrace door opened behind me. Ryan Harrison walked out, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He had traded his white coat for a casual sweater, and his salt and pepper hair was tousled by the breeze. Penny, for your thoughts? He handed me a glass. Just thinking about how different life can look in a year. I leaned against the railing. 12 months ago, I woke up in a charity ward with divorce papers on my chest. Today, I'm here. Do you regret any of it? The anger, the revenge? I considered the question seriously. No. But I'm glad it's over. I don't want to spend the rest of my life defined by what they did to me. Ryan moved closer, his arm brushing against mine. So what do you want to spend the rest of your life defined by? I looked at him. This man who had protected me when I was at my weakest, who had testified against the hospital staff who had been bribed to move me to the general ward, who had visited me every week for a year, never pushing, never demanding, just present. Maybe by the people I choose to keep close. I smiled. And by the good I can do with what I've been given. That sounds like a good life. It does, doesn't it? Ryan reached for my hand. His fingers were warm, steady, familiar. Would there be room in that good life for dinner? Not a business dinner. An actual date. I pretended to think about it. I don't know. I'm very busy and important now. I've heard. He laughed. The papers called you Chicago's most unexpected power player last week. Did they also mention I'm an excellent tipper and very easy to please at restaurants? They did not. That's crucial information. I turned to face him fully, still holding his hand. How do you feel about deep dish pizza and cheap beer? Ryan's smile was bright enough to rival the sunset. I feel like that's the best offer I've had all year. We walked back inside together, leaving the fading light behind us. Somewhere across the city, Derek Hartwell was preparing for his sentencing hearing. Somewhere, Amber was facing charges of her own. But I had stopped keeping track of their misery months ago. It no longer brought me satisfaction. Because here's what I learned in the year since I lost my liver and found myself. Revenge is a fire that can warm you or consume you. The trick is knowing when to let it burn and when to let it die. Derek wanted to take everything from me. Instead, he gave me the push I needed to become someone I never knew I could be. Vivian wanted to break me. Instead, her cruelty tempered me into steel. I am Maya Chen now, not Maya Hartwell, not that desperate orphan looking for a family to accept her. I am the founder of Phoenix Capital, the director of the Second Chance Foundation, and the woman who learned that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so beautiful that their existence becomes irrelevant. The scar on my side has faded to a thin silver line. I used to hide it. Now I wear it like a badge of honor. It reminds me of what I survived, what I overcame, and what I've become. Some stories end with the villain in chains. This one ends with me walking into the future, hand in hand with someone who sees me for exactly who I am. The girl who was thrown away became a woman who cannot be broken. And honestly, that's a better ending than anything I could have imagined while signing those papers in a cold hospital room, hoping for a family that would never love me back. The old Maya died on that operating table. But the woman who woke up, she was ready to live.